Hi, welcome to Health Beat. I'm Judy Marie, and today's show is talking about human trafficking. My guest is Andrea Lundy, who's the Anti-Human Trafficking public educator for the Kenora Sexual Assault Centre. Today's topic is a really tough one, but it's really important. So please use your discretion as we go into the show. Andrea, I want to thank you so much for coming and joining us on Health Beat today.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for the invitation, Judy.
And as I said, this is a really tough topic. I know when I was researching it, I kind of had to stop and put the brakes on, but I think it's so important that we share this information with our viewers. So
I agree, because it's becoming so much more prevalent in the Kenora area and northwestern Ontario, considering we're the only highway between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg, and we are surrounded by many First Nations communities, as well as being close to the States and Lake of the Woods, of course, going across the border as well, that we are seeing an increase in human trafficking in the area.
So a lot of factors that impact on our area, and I mean, it's not something you want to think about that's happening in your community.
Yeah. When I first got the job and I was talking to my friend, and she was asking what I'd be doing, told her human trafficking, and she said, "We don't have human trafficking in Kenora." We certainly do, and it's a big issue.
For the sake of our readers, let's talk about a few terms.
Sure.
Because I know I learned a lot in preparation for the show. So, you know, types of human trafficking, and then maybe the difference between smuggling and human trafficking, and also looking at the difference between, is there a difference actually between prostitution and human trafficking? So if we could just explore that a little bit for our viewers.
Certainly. Mainly two types of trafficking across the globe, and that is international trafficking, and it's becoming a booming business next to drug crimes. So it's becoming very big. So that's when people are trafficked from other countries. So it could be across the border from Canada to the US. It could be from an Asian country, an African country. It's when people are brought into a different country in order to be exploited and used for their whatever services that the trafficker wants them to do.
Okay.
And then you wanted to know between smuggling and human trafficking. Oh, I forgot to mention too, that of course there's domestic trafficking, which is within our national borders.
Oh, okay.
In terms of smuggling, smuggling is when there's consent and the person who wants to come to a country or come to Canada for the hopes of a better life actually pays someone to bring them into the country. So it's with consent, and the person who moves is paying someone to help them out.
Okay.
And then there's human trafficking, which is without consent. It's literally modern day slavery, and it's when someone has no choice, they're threatened, coerced, forced to do things because they're threatened by various actions that the human trafficker might take. So it's without consent, and the difference between the prostitution and trafficking, there again, is a consent issue. Prostitution, the individual would receive the money for their services that they'd offered. And with trafficking, they do not. It's without the consent of the individual being used to exploit them for sexual favors or whatever it may be.
Okay, because there's a lot of different terminology, and sometimes
Yes.
they get used interchangeably. So I think that's helped to just clarify some of the confusion around that. So when we think about human trafficking, quite often your mind goes right to the sex trade. But there are other forms of human trafficking, is that correct?
Certainly. So there's the sex trade, there's labor. So what will happen is the trafficker will bring in people to, say, go to a construction site and work, or it could be a hotel or motel, or it could be in the farming fields. So that's when they're used for labor, and the laborer doesn't get anything out of it. The trafficker sells those people to the employer to do whatever work they have. So it's a very cheap way of labor, and it is illegal, as is all the other ones as well. We also have domestic servitude. So you'll often hear of nannies being brought over from Europe or the Asian countries to work in a home, whether it be as a housekeeper or a nanny, and they are not paid. They get room and board, basically. They are not allowed to leave. Their identification is taken away from them, so they have no place to go and can't leave.
Wow.
There's also, too, it's a horrible one, and doesn't so much happen in Canada, but who knows anymore, organ trafficking. So say, for example, a child is in need of a heart or whatever it may be, and they're not on the transplant list here in Canada, so the trafficker would offer to bring somebody over so that they could harvest their organs for that child. And then the family would pay that trafficker for that. So it's a horrible, horrible trade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It almost makes me want to just pause for a moment to kind of digest this information. So you already mentioned, yes, human trafficking does exist here in Kenora. How prevalent is it? And is it usually just young girls, or can it involve other people in the community?
All populations are vulnerable. Usually, you're looking at, of course, quite a few First Nations Indigenous human beings, primarily young girls. They want to have a better life. Everybody who does this wants to have a better life. And they're promised this by their trafficker. So the Indigenous young female population is huge. And they come to Kenora because they want to get out of the situation they are in at home, whether it be poverty or physical or psychological abuse, any of those factors, lack of education, lack of clean water, anything like that would certainly motivate them to come here. The LGBTQ population, of course, is vulnerable as well. Anybody can be trafficked, and that includes men and boys, the elderly. People are trafficked anywhere from 3 to 93. You hear about elder abuse, that can tie into human trafficking as well. So it is prevalent in Kenora. We have probably almost every day someone come into the Kenora Sexual Assault Centre to self-identify. And I think a lot of that has to do too that people are becoming more knowledgeable and aware that the fact that human trafficking exists in Kenora. And we've been trying to outreach and provide as much public education as possible, and we really feel that we've had an impact based upon the number of people who have come to the centre to talk to us.
And so that's good that the center is there, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish with this show
Absolutely.
as well, is
Yeah.
to get the word out about this difficult subject that it does exist in Kenora, and later on in the show we'll get into some help and supports
Certainly.
for people as well. And you already talked about some of the factors that, make Kenora kind of a community where people would want to come and target, based on our location and different circumstances as well. So that was good. I'm just thinking, is there anything else about trafficking in Kenora and that you'd like to add before we go to our break?
And I'll mention this later on, but just people to be aware of what's going on, to watch. If you see some of the signs and symptoms, talk to someone, let people know. Most trafficking occurs, say, surrounding, it could be a strip club, it could be a mall, it could be a school or outside of a shelter, wherever people congregate. So it's just important to observe and watch and report.
Okay. Well, that's great. We're going to take a short break.
Sure.
And we'll be back. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for more of Health Beat. My guest today is Andrea Lundy from the Kenora Sexual Assault Centre, and today we're talking about a really challenging topic, human trafficking. Welcome back, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Judy.
So we talked in the first segment about some of the factors that put people at risk, being in poverty and homelessness and that. But who are the traffickers?
Surprisingly enough, the traffickers are usually people that the victims know. So it could be a friend, a family member, your boyfriend or girlfriend, because certainly women are involved in the trafficking industry as well. So it's really anybody, young, old. Often what happens too is the victims sometimes become the victimizers when their pimps or their traffickers want to acquire more girls or people to do the human trafficking, the sexual exploitation. So they have girls who've already been recruited recruit additional people. Because it's horrible to know, but the average stat in Canada in terms of the amount of money that a pimp makes per girl per year is $280,000.
Wow.
So they want as many girls or boys or men or women as possible to increase their income.
So it sounds like financial gain is really the motivation for...
That's the main motivation. These people are not stupid. They know what to do in order to acquire these women or men or boys and girls to traffic.
That's a good segue into my next question, because how do they do this? Like how do they recruit people, and what's the process that they go through?
It's a real grooming process, and the traffickers actually study people psychologically, body language. They watch for someone who is vulnerable, who may be on their own, who may not be socializing with friends, appear very isolated. So they watch, and they groom, and they gently acquire their friendship. These people may be very lonely, they're away from home, they don't have any money. So the traffickers will offer them, oh, you look cold. Come, I have a nice warm room to stay in. Or it doesn't look like you've had a good hot meal for a while. Come with me. Oh, here's some nice jewelry or nice clothes, or I'll take you out for dinner. So they start to acquire the victim's trust. And eventually what happens many times is that the victim often falls in love with the trafficker, so that they have that psychological control over them. Also, too, physical threats are huge. So what happens is they'll threaten their families, they'll threaten to kill their dog, they'll threaten to hurt them, take things away from them. So gradually, as that grooming process continues, there's less of a connection or a psychological connection with the trafficker, because they're eventually going to want to sell them to Johns and people who want to have sexual favors done. The other method too is drugs. And about 2 months ago, I had a lovely young lady come in, and she is self-identified as being human trafficked, and she had never done drugs before, and her pimp would spike her drinks, unbeknownst to her. So she would become out of it. She would then be sold for sexual favors, and when she became lucid, she was so addicted to that particular drug that she maintained those particular actions in order to keep receiving the drugs from her pimp. So they're not stupid, and it's a very controlling game.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a sad situation.
Yeah, and I think it's good that we're helping to get the word out here today on this show on this very, very difficult topic. What are some of the early warning signs? Because we talked about it, about the strategies from the traffickers, but what are some of the early warning signs to look for that somebody might be in the process of being groomed or being trafficked?
And this is really key, and really this is one of my major roles at the Centre in Anti-Human Trafficking, is letting people know what the signs are so we can prevent this from happening instead of having to deal always with the other end of things. So some of the signs could be people become very withdrawn, their behavior changes, mood swings happen. I mean, everyone has mood swings and gets depressed once in a while. So we're looking at a combination of factors, just not one thing. It could be all of a sudden they have these expensive gifts. So where are they getting that from? Where are they getting money from initially? They could be very protective of their boyfriend, their so-called boyfriend. Don't want any bad things said about them, so really protecting them. It could be physical signs on their body, so bruises, cuts. I talked to one girl not too long ago who self-mutilated her arms. And also, actually, the pimp did as well. It could be things like acting up, leaving home for a couple days. With kids, could be skipping school, becoming very argumentative and aggressive. Could be the language that they use, because there is a street language and lingo that they use, and it is called the game. They could have an alias, like two names, or different code words that they use. They could pack up a bunch of clothes when they leave in the evening. So most people don't usually bring a change of clothes with them when they go out at nighttime. Let me see. There's just a combination of factors. The use of weapons, drug paraphernalia, loads of condoms in the garbage or packages seen that are normally not there before. So the list is endless. And as I said, it's a combination of those factors, just not one. So it's important, especially for parents too, to watch and see the change in kids' behavior. But this happens at the adult level too. The signs and symptoms are still the same regardless of the age.
So just having awareness of some of the signs to watch for, and, you know, caring for each other, whether
Yes.
you're in a family situation or your friends, kind of looking out for each other. It's important to get this information out. What about the internet? Does that play a role at all
Yes,
in
it
trafficking?
does, because I know you've heard tons of stories about young women, young men being lured in by the internet. Oh, meet me here and we'll go out for dinner. Or, oh, I love you, you're so pretty and beautiful, I want to get to know you. And also too, and I mean, it even happens at the Sexual Assault Centre, going online to make appointments with your Johns, or setting up a drug deal on the internet. So we have to be so careful, and monitoring, especially your children, on the internet is key, because as I said, these people are smart and they know what to do. It's a very vulnerable age when you're a teenager into your 20s. You're trying to figure out who you are and where you want to go. And anything that positively reinforces your abilities, your looks, anything like that lures people in. So please monitor the internet. It's so important.
And it's more challenging because years ago you'd have your computer in your
Right.
centralized location, right,
Yeah.
in the home or whatever. But now there's so many mobile devices that it's much harder to keep tabs on things. And so, yeah, that probably would
Yeah, and
play
it's
a big
important
role.
too that, especially parents, watch to see if their child or their youth is being secretive about their cell phone, hiding it, not sharing anything. That's key as well. It's a red flag to go up.
Okay, well, we'll take a short break
Sure.
and we'll come back for more of Health Beat.
Certainly.
Thank you for joining us for Health Beat. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to Health Beat. Today my guest is Andrea Lundy from the Kenora Sexual Assault Centre, and today we're facing a very tough subject, human trafficking. Welcome back, Andrea.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Wow, you shared so much information with us on the first two segments. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about your role at the Kenora Sexual Assault
Certainly.
Centre?
As already said, I'm the public educator for Anti-Human Trafficking. So it's my role to create a greater awareness of the fact that it does exist in Kenora and across northwestern Ontario. And we will be providing outreach to other communities as well, Sioux Lookout, Dryden, Rainy River, those particular areas as well. So my role is to public educate, to reach out to as many people, organizations that we can, and also to broaden our network, as people think that I just go into the agencies that we have, the social service agencies, to inform people. We've met with the Hospitality Alliance of Kenora. I'm meeting with the Rotary, with the Lions, with various businesses doing presentations, with the banks. The list is endless. Working with Creighton Youth Centre, Bemosey, and Keswick School. So trying to create that outreach, and we're going to be holding some conferences upcoming too on anti-human trafficking. And there's two of us that work in the role in anti-human trafficking at the centre, and the other is Alex Akong, and she does more of the coordination where I do the actual education of it. So.
And it really sounds like this is an issue that you need full community education and everybody working together.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are there any gaps in service locally that you think we face here in Kenora?
Oh, certainly, and it's been so identified in the news lately with the shelter. I mean, it only has, was it 48 beds, I believe?
Something like that, yeah.
And there are a lot more people out there, people who are being trafficked, sexually assaulted, have addiction problems, and there are just not enough resources for people to use and to get better. And I think also people are not aware that some of these resources actually exist for them to reach out to. Yeah, there are many resources. Also housing, affordable housing for those who may be impoverished, the food issue, there are numerous gaps, and I know everyone is trying to address them, but it's just increasing too, especially with the big meth issue.
And I just want to mention, because I know some of the partners I work with in the community, that Grand Council Treaty 3 also
Yes.
has an Indigenous support program for
Great.
those that are serviced by the Treaty 3
Yeah,
area. So
absolutely.
just to put that out there
Yeah,
as well.
and we've been working with them too, and have done numerous referrals over to us, so that's good.
So there's a lot of working together
Yes.
in community,
Yeah.
which is great. Who else do you think needs to learn about human trafficking? Who needs to be educated about the issue? You mentioned quite a few partners.
Yes, I did. Certainly social service agencies, bus drivers. I reached out to the bus companies to talk to them about, because they see these kids or youth every single day when they're going to school. So who picks them up? And I know with younger kids, there's always someone there to get them. But older kids, is there a change in behavior? Are they, they're not on the bus anymore? Are they skipping school? As I said, the Hospitality Alliance with the hotels and motels, because that's where a lot of the trafficking takes place. Some hotels do have a module that people have to take, but we are more than happy to go out there and educate people. I was just at Beaver Brae yesterday, and there were about 50 youth, I think grade 11 and 12, in the Four Directions program, so that I talked to them. So even if they're being trafficked, but also so they can watch and observe to see if their friends or families are being trafficked. So really, it's everybody that needs to know. Firefighters, we work closely with the OPP, and actually went to do some sessions with Treaty 3 as well. So we are open to everyone and anyone. I mentioned the youth centers already. Going into the Valley View Group Home, I think next week or the week after. So whomever wants the education, we're reaching out to as many places as we possibly can.
And we'll certainly provide the contact
I know,
information at
yeah,
the end of the
thank
show so
you.
people can follow
Yeah.
up. When we talk about the people who are being trafficked and that, what are some of the challenges and fears that people would have that might be barriers for them
Right.
coming forward to seek help?
Well, sometimes they don't know they're being trafficked. That's just their lifestyle so far, and they don't know anything else. So they think it's a normal phase of life just to go through this. Often they're scared to death of their trafficker because they're afraid that they're going, as I said before, hurt their family, hurt them. So they don't want to come forward and expose themselves to those threats and coercion. Shame is a big one. Many people, they've been human trafficked and they're embarrassed and they're ashamed, and they don't want to have their family and friends known that they've been human trafficked and sexually exploited, so it's an embarrassment. Also too, and often we find this with the Indigenous communities, is the fear of talking to the police, that they're the bad guys. And so we have to get past that too. And there's also too the issue, and I have to think of the right term, is sort of the history of the Indigenous population and working with the police and working with the Caucasian population, that there's a fear there that they can't be trusted. And then also too, a big issue is often the victims are in love with their pimp. They don't want to lose that. So there again, it's all about the control, but certainly signs to watch out for.
Wow. So, say for example, you have concerns of someone maybe you know or somebody you think is vulnerable in the community. What can you as an individual do?
There are numerous options. I was mentioning to you earlier, I had a mom come in last week to talk to me because she had concerns that her daughter was being human trafficked. So she came in and talked to us. We then actually contacted a social worker who is working with this young lady in order to have that reported. And unfortunately, lot of human trafficking is not reported, and I mentioned some of the reasons already, and it's really sad because we know it goes on everywhere, and it's just not being addressed. What else they can do, certainly, and this will basically apply to the next question as well, call the OPP, Treaty 3, talk to your guidance counselor, talk to your social worker, a nurse, your best friend, your mom, your dad, a family member. Just let people know. That's the key thing, because we can't do anything to help unless we know about it. So it's really important that everybody reach out, just not the individual that's being trafficked, because individuals in the sex trade usually take 5 to 7 times attempts to leave the sex trade before they get out. Okay. So can you imagine someone who's beaten down psychologically, physically, and they tried a couple times and there was just no hope that they were getting out? They're just going to stop. They're not going to try anymore. Yeah, so it's really important that we reach out.
And my last question was, what was one of the key messages that you want to leave with our viewers? But I think that was a pretty important message right there.
Yeah. Talk to people. Let people know what's going on. People are amazing. They're so supportive. There's a great support network out there. And people really, in positions like I'm in, teachers, what have you, are really caring and loving and want to help.
I want to thank you, Andrea, for helping us understand and learn more about the human trafficking issue and what's being done for anti-human trafficking in our community. So thank you very much for joining us on Health Beat.
It was my pleasure, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get the message out there.
Human trafficking, it's real. It happens in Kenora. And as we learned today, anybody can be a victim. It's really important to know that help and support is available, not only for those being trafficked, but their friends, loved ones, and caregivers. If you are scared, or if you have concerns, or you know somebody, please, please reach out. You are not alone. There are people who care. Please check out our links at the end of the show for where help can be provided. And please join us again for our next episode of Health Beat.